huge thank you to CIBC for making We Get It possible.
Folks, this is a very interesting day today. So first and foremost, my name is Alex Mandarino, host of We Get It, and we made a bit of an adjustment, and our first episode is actually going to be coming out on today, Tuesday, March 29th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we made a bit of an adjustment for the special guest on with me right now, who is a close friend of mine. The past few years, we've kind of known each other. It's my friend, Joe Bakhmoutski, and Joe is currently in Australia as it stands, so we had to make some adjustments on timing. But Joe is someone who wears many hats. He is a coach. He is podcaster, author. He wears so many different hats and so many different mediums, but someone who has obviously gone through cancer in his own right, mental health struggles, and kind of taken that and thrown it together in the most positive and kind of uplifting sort of ways. So we're going to get into a really interesting conversation with Joe. But first and foremost, Joe, welcome, and appreciate you jumping on with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex. Thank you for the beautiful intro, and thanks for having me. It's just a pleasure to be here.
Always a good time. So it's nice to catch up with you here. And I'm going to start off with more of a general question to kind of get to know you and for our listeners to get to know you as well. But Joe, what would be 3 words you would use to describe yourself?
Alex, I would say in the moment. That's what I aspire to be. This is, I guess, I've realized going through cancer that, we don't have that much time left to do things. And I spent a lot of time in my life putting things off. And now I realize that the only time we have is now. So I aspire to be present with people that I care about in everything that I'm doing, to be more engaged. And it's hard. It's hard sometimes because we get so busy and there's so much going on, right? But I feel that is like an ambition that I'm always kind of striving towards, because that's what I believe. When you're more present, when you're more engaged, you feel better about yourself, you're more creative, you can do things that you haven't been able to do before, you can see new solutions, and you can have more fun, which I think is cool as well.
I love it. I love it. I love it, the answer. I mean, most people go with 3 descriptive words, but you chose in the moment. I think that describes things perfectly, because the bit I've known you, I can kind of attest to that. And so for those who might not know you or have not, I know you've done a We Get It episode in the past, but for those who may not have caught it or don't know much about you, can you tell us a little bit about your cancer story with testicular cancer and then everything beyond?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. I guess before cancer, I was at that point probably the best time of my life. I fell in love with this woman, and we had a child together, and we moved into this new house, and everything was going really well. And I was just in the shower one night after work, just getting myself clean, when I felt this lump. I felt this lump on my testicle. And just in that moment, I knew that something was really wrong. And the reason I knew that, because it kind of came together, like it all of a sudden it made sense. And I don't know whether we will all guess, maybe sometimes go through that experience with cancer, but I just realized, like, this is why I felt like all my underwear shrunk, and I was feeling this feeling for several weeks, and I couldn't get to sleep, because I was tossing and turning in my bed because everything around my groin just felt so weird and unnatural. And so having that experience made me realize that something was off, and I did the only smart thing I've done in a long time, was I ran to the doctors, and it was a good move because things happened quite quickly. And before I knew it, I ended up in the urologist's office, and he sat down opposite me, telling me, you know what, Joe, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but it's definitely cancer. And that's why things started happening. That led to operation and chemotherapy and all those wonderful things that cancer brings into our life. So it just comes out of nowhere, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It just hits you kind of from left field a lot of the time, especially the younger of us, right? And so that journey obviously led to a lot of different things, which I think we're going to touch on today. But for context, for really those listening, the two of us were acquainted first a few years back when we were hosting our individual initiatives and podcasts. Simplify Cancer for Yourself, Soar Above Cancer for myself and Gabrielle, who's now with Young Adult Cancer Canada. But how did Simplify Cancer really come about? And when you first kind of started it, what were your initial goals? And what did you kind of want to introduce to the world?
You know what? When I guess it all comes back to the point of coming home after my treatment. Coming home was tough because I kind of expected things to just start to get my life back. But I realized very quickly that I was no longer the person that I was before that. Not only physically, even though I had obviously to adjust to some changes in my body and to deal with all the side effects and after effects and fatigue. And I put on a lot of weight because of all the steroids that I was taking. I was all over the place. I had people, I had some close friends in my life who disappeared in my experience of going through cancer. So all of that was tough, and it was weighing heavy on me. And I also, at one point, I remember distinctly how I was sitting outside and I was feeling sorry for myself, and I was miserable and I was upset. But I also thought, you know what? I didn't go through all of this for nothing, just to end up feeling miserable and feeling upset. I mean, maybe this is another chance at life. And if this is another chance at life, well, I want to figure things out. I want to make sense of it. I want to live the life that I deserve for me, for the way that I want to be out in the world. And I didn't know what that way is going to be or where it would lead to. I just knew that I haven't lived to like my potential. I knew that hasn't happened yet. And so I thought, well, what could I do to make something that would, first of all, help me make sense of things and perhaps make sense of to others. And that's when I thought, as special and as unique as I am, I'm sure that other people go through this. And podcasts was something that I listened to in the hospital when I was there for whatever my chemo was, 9 weeks. And so because I didn't feel up to it, but I wanted to have that sense of having a conversation and someone who's listening to it to be a part of the conversation by the virtue of listening to it, because to be able to see part of themselves and to learn, to hear from experts, to hear from people who've been touched by cancer, to see part of themselves. And I guess, that's a huge part of what you're doing, Alex, and what YEG is all about. And I guess if I was to describe that sense, is knowing that you're not alone. Right? That's really something that I really started as, is how do you just make sure that people feel that they're not alone, that they're able to make sense of their experience, and to listen to inspiration, to advice, to support, to people who are maybe in a very similar place to them, or maybe slightly ahead of them in terms of time or whatever. So that's been my goal, to kind of, make a difference in a way that was meaningful to me and make sense of life. And that's, I guess, where it's all come about.
Yeah. And it obviously taken it to some great heights from what I've seen, from what we've discussed over the past couple of years. And obviously the transition from the podcast that was started to your initial book. And to confirm, Simplify Cancer was the first book that you had written, correct?
Yes, absolutely right.
There you go. Same title, obviously, as the podcast, the whole initiative that you started. So what were the overall themes of the book when you put it together? Like, I assume it kind of followed the podcast thought process, but what were the themes of the book? Like, what would someone pick up on it if they were to read the book?
No, it's funny, Alex, but when I started doing writing the book, I spent probably about a year to a year and a half. It was inspired by, I was getting kind of great feedback about it. And I thought, well, why don't I write the book? And when I was writing, I spent about a year and a half, I believe, writing it. And I read the book that I wrote, and I realized, you know what, there is so much of me in it, which sounds weird because you think, well, that's how it should be. But I thought, well, there's a lot of my story in there, which is great, but I didn't feel like there was like takeaways. There was something that anyone could apply in their lives, someone who was going through cancer. So that's why I essentially threw everything right And I spent the next year or probably less than that, more like 9 months or whatever, to rewrite the book, to essentially focus on 4 key things, which is really, first of all, it's why me. Is really that place where you try to make sense of what's going on and figure out what's right for you. Right, that was the really, that's the first part of the book. Then it's about like what now, like it's kind of practical things to try to get you in a place where you're dealing with the experience in a helpful way. The third is essentially about who's going to support me and be there for me throughout this experience, which is also vital, for all of us go through cancer. So talk about how to get the kind of support on your terms. And part 4 was essentially just how do I deal with waiting and uncertainty, right? Because we all go through this experience of waiting, of not knowing what's going on, of how things might turn out. And that's tough because it completely changes our lives, right? From a point where you have plans, you have goals, you have life is kind of laid out, or at least it's going to some kind of predetermined path that you set out for yourself. All of a sudden that goes out the window. How do you deal with that, right? I think that's vital. So that's what I was trying to really answer in the book. And when going through that perspective, it really helped me to not only kind of make sense of my own experience, but really to transform it into something that I believe can be helpful. So it was a bit of a journey there as well.
Clearly. Well, I'm actually curious that we didn't kind of prep this particular question and talk about it beforehand, but to have to go back after kind of writing sort of a draft and make changes to the fact that you had all of this written about yourself, was it difficult to kind of then craft a book and remove all of the pieces of how did you determine maybe what you kept in about yourself and what you removed? Was it tough to kind of make those decisions when it came to actually releasing the book?
It was incredibly hurtful. It was like cutting off pieces of me. And so what I've actually done is when I was rewriting it, I created a different file and I called it outtakes. And I cut out everything that which was ended up pretty much being the entire thing, into this book. So it kind of gave me an ability to save face. I was like, okay, this isn't completely gone. It's out there somewhere. But what ended up happening is it helped me to really connect the stories and relate them in a new way to the helpful points that I was trying to get across. And that really put things into perspective. That also made my personal stories clear. So, but now they're integral part of the book. They're not just, oh, here it is. It's not just there as me talking about me, but the stories come from either making a point or sharing something that is meaningful. And that is something that we've talked a lot about with you, Alex, and with Gabrielle, and I think is a key part of what YAC does in the context of being able to share your own story and to be able to make sense of your own experience, which I think is absolutely vital to young adults going through cancer when you're trying to make sense of what's going on. And it really, I believe, it led me to realization that, sometimes people say, well, maybe people are not great about opening up. I don't believe that that's true. I think that may have been true, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, I don't know, but I don't certainly believe it's true now. I think that the challenge that we have in expressing it and perhaps sharing it with other people, our own experience with cancer, is because we haven't had an opportunity to make sense of it yourself. That I believe is the key.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And so with obviously transitioning to more writing tactics and conversation in that realm, one of your newer books, Finding Hopes in Times of Uncertainty, was there like a specific event that led you to the initiation of writing this book? Or was this something that when you wrote Simplify Cancer, you were like, I'm going to do another one, I just have to wait for the right time? Was there like an inciting incident, or did you already kind of have an idea of what this was going to become?
Yeah, what a great question, Alex, because it really was inspired by a conversation. It was inspired by a conversation with my grandmother, who is now 96, I believe, years old. And she is the wisest, the most incredible person I have ever met in my life. And we were talking, this was at kind of start of the pandemic. And we were talking about the virus and all the craziness that was going on. And my grandma said to me, you know what, because we were talking on the phone, and she said to me, you know what, Joe, I experienced something similar. And she told me about the typhus epidemic that took place in the 1930s in the Soviet Union, and which I really had no idea that it killed like more than 3 million people in Soviet Union alone. So it was pretty insane. And she was at the time 19, and she was a medical student, and she was sent off to this remote mountain village to look after the people who were getting sick. And it was tough, right? Because lots of people were getting typhus. My grandma Nila died from it herself. There was hardly any food to go around. And also back then, the restrictions were, the quarantine measures were, they had red army guards posted around the village with a shoot on sight policy if you try to leave. That kind of put it ultimately in a different light. And so when I was listening to her, I said, Grandma, like, this is insane. I mean, how did you guys even get through this? And she said to me, you know what, Joe, we had hope. We had hope that one day things are going to be different. We had hope that one day things are going to change. And that's what really, it hit me so hard, Alex, because it made me realize that, when I thought back on all of my experiences of going through cancer and mental health and just nasty things that life throws your way, hope was one of the things that really helped me to get me through it, even when I didn't know how things might turn out. So I then kind of combed through kind of life experience to extract things that helped me to first of all, find hope in a difficult time, to also build hope towards, dreams and ambitions that I have. Because that's not easy, right? We know that there's a lot of challenges and obstacles that come up in the way. And also to share hope, which is how do you give hope to others? And from that perspective, that really brought the focus for me for wanting to do this book as something that would be a meaningful event that could, again, help and support someone when they need to.
100%. It's an incredible story too, to kind of showcase how you transitioned into this book and why it was so important to get that idea out. And obviously to be able to relate it to a completely different scenario, but, touch on the fact that everyone goes through that, especially at this day and age, it's incredible. So it's interesting. And I'm wondering, having written with Gabrielle a book ourselves, was the writing process different from writing this newer book than it was from Simplified Cancer at all? Or like, did you find it maybe easier to write because you've had a book written in the past? Was it different? I'm just curious what the parallels may have been between those two.
Exactly, and I'm sure that your process with Gabrielle was different because it was a collaborative process. For me, I with finding hope in times of uncertainty, what made a big difference was that I looked at all the mistakes that I made and writing the first one, and I thought, okay, I'm definitely not doing that again. And so what that really translated to in real life for me was, and this all goes back to what we touched on earlier about telling your story, was each chapter that I didn't write it at first, I wrote an outline that I then spoke out into a video like this, that I then transcribed, and then I kind of retyped everything and rewrote it as a book. And that's in a nutshell exactly how that process worked. Because for me, I realized that this is one of the critical things, at least for my personal way of doing things, is that making sense of experience whether that's of your own experience or whether it's something you want to translate into some kind of a story or a book or a podcast or whatever that might be. I believe it starts from a point of speaking, because when we have a conversation, whether that's one-on-one, whether that's in a group, or whether it's even out loud to yourself, you are forced to make sense of things, right? You are forced to communicate. You cannot be how we might be sometimes stuck in our own heads, where one thing sets you off and you go off on a tangent, and then you kind of end up going, what happened? I don't even know how I ended up there. Yeah. So when you talk out loud, it kind of has to make sense. And that's what I used in writing the book. I spoke the book out essentially, recorded on video, transcribed it, and then rewrote it essentially. But the core ideas were there, and there was a sense of flow and a sense of connection, because I don't know about you, Alex, but I need to be kept on a tight leash. Otherwise, I just start rambling on, and that's why we all need those kind of guideposts for ourselves, I think, in order to stay on track.
I couldn't agree more. I'm definitely the type to just, if you ask a question or if just I'm given the floor, you just go off and you're talking for hours. But I mean, I guess that might be helpful in the sense that you can at least kind of rein yourself in and you have more information to pull from when writing the book. But I actually find that really insightful to how you wrote it. So that's a very good piece of info. I appreciate that. And I think all the people who are maybe interested in writing or at least getting into it can probably take a lot from that writing process. So that's really cool. Now so for myself, oh no, absolutely. When I start work every day, I start at 8 a.m. early for myself. I get up at the same time, and obviously starting your day at work in any capacity, can get you're thinking ahead and going, okay, it's gonna be a long day. So I make a cup of coffee every morning, and I find that is like one small piece of actual peace. I'm happy. I'm like, this is great. I want my coffee every morning. It gives me a routine. It's a great way to start the day. And I mean, one big concept in really like this kind of concept of finding hope in times of uncertainty is finding joy in small things every day. And it's a concept that everyone really has access to doing because small things are a part of everyone's day. Why do you think this was so important as a theme for this book?
Yeah, what a fantastic point you make, Alex, because we all need that structure to support us, right? We all need to start the day right. We all need to have our own kind of predictable way of kind of getting ourselves into it. And I think it's so easy to dismiss, right? We all know this, right? When we talk about, the small things in life, I mean, it's such a simple and obvious thing to talk about that it's easy to dismiss as some new age thing or something maybe that we all know of, but we don't really practice. But I think the power of living with joy and finding it in small things in life is that I believe that life, it doesn't take a long time to change. It seems like it does, but life can change in an instant. The change that happens is instant. When we think about life, when you reflect on how life is, things didn't take a long time. You made a decision to change, even if that decision wasn't like a decision between, one thing or another, but we made change in an instant. And that's why these moments of joy and presence and connecting that is so vital, because it forces us to, not forces us, but it leads us or enables you to kind of to establish this way to guide yourself through life and anchor it to little bits that we can find in our own experience that help you to feel better about yourself. Mm-hmm. It helps you to tap into your own personal power, to be the person who you want to be, to find joy in things that are already there, or at least within your control or sphere of influence. Because I think that's where you draw the line, right? Because we oftentimes, especially when your life has been touched by cancer, oftentimes there's a lot of things you can't change. You can't change the situation, And sometimes that can feel helpless, and sometimes that can feel incredibly difficult, which it is. But we cannot change the situation, but we sometimes can change the way that we look at it. And I believe that that's where our strength lies, to find the perspectives in life and to continually find ways and perspectives that are helpful to us. And one of those perspectives is looking at life as little things that we can pick out and enjoy, whether that's a cup of coffee, whether that's a catch up with a friend, whether it's doing something silly for yourself that you, like other people might find stupid, but you are going to love. And I think that's what gives us joy. That's what gives us presence. That's what gives us an ability to live a meaningful life on your terms.
Mm-hmm. And it allows you, it's the idea of reframing and thinking of a certain way and think, I can't really change the way that this is going to happen. I don't have the control of that, but how do I maybe look at it from a perspective of maybe finding a silver lining or something? So yeah, that's great to hear. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Joe, you've
Thanks, man.
dealt, no, of course. And I mean, you've dealt with both cancer and mental health struggles. I'm sure a lot of people who have had cancer have dealt with both, whether that be separate or whether it be within the same capacity. But did you find that these two scenarios and two kind of parts of your life that you've gone through, did you find that they ever intertwined with each other during your cancer experience?
Absolutely. And I believe that happens in two ways. First of all, mental health is can come in the space of having pre-existing condition in your life before going through cancer. So in my case, I've had anxiety for most of my life and panic attacks. And so going through cancer, it kind of just dials that up, right? Because all of a sudden it gives you even more reasons to kind of be anxious about, and that's kind of one way it comes in. But the other angle, of course, with mental health is that again, we've all experienced it one way or another. If you've been touched by cancer, is the experience of like this, it's a traumatic experience, whether we like it or not. It's a tough time, especially if you're a young adult, and it changes your body, it changes how you are out in the world, it changes your long-term vision for yourself, and I really believe that it forces us to reconsider everything that we know. And I really had no idea about the connection of mental health and cancer until I went on this journey of Simplify Cancer podcast and the book, and interviewing dozens and dozens of experts in oncology and psycho-oncology, which is the whole field of psychology around cancer, and speaking with so many people who've been through the cancer experience themselves, to know that the depression around cancer is clinical depression, is the same thing as the clinical depression that exists. And the reason why I bring this up is because we sometimes go through a cancer or live our life after cancer, and we kind of go, well, it's cancer, it's supposed to be hard, right? It doesn't occur to you to seek help. It certainly didn't to me. And it's only after finding out all of this stuff, which I wish I knew earlier, that I was able to maybe seek help, and help from, now I know that there's so many great resources. There's people who specialize in this, specialize in helping people who've been through cancer. There's people who, they know what to do, they know how to say. And I think this is, if there is anything that I would have done differently in my cancer experience, as I look back on it now, Alex, it's this. It's getting some mental health support, because first of all, there is nothing shameful about that. You get the support that you need, and you can get it in multiple modalities. You can get it either, with counselors, you can get it through an organization that points you the right direction, like YAG. You can get it through, there's so many channels and avenues, and you can use all of them to help you. That this technological, I should say, interventions, right? Like there's all sorts of things, but use all the tools that you can available to you that are going to be helpful to you. I really believe that that is the absolute key, is not waiting for things to change, is not leaving things as they are, but getting the support and the encouragement that you need now, that also helps you to feel more in control, because you're doing something about it, and you're ultimately getting the support that you need on your terms. Because guess what, if you don't like the person that whether they be a psychologist or a counselor, get another one. That's just how it is. And but it's so important to kind of decide to do that, not because there's something wrong with you, but because it can help you to live the life that you truly deserve after everything that you've been through with cancer.
Mm-hmm. There's so many ways to get help these days, like you were saying. Like, it's everywhere. There's so many avenues. You might as well take advantage of it if you need to seek that help. And I think it's warranted. I think this generation is a little bit more open and like willing to kind of give it a try, but I think it's just taking that first step for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just trying things out until you find what works for you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of people out there, I think, now that probably before listening to this, but even now probably listening to this episode, who want to get involved in whether it be podcasts or storytelling or like writing a book. So like, what would one piece of advice be for you to share with someone looking to share his or her story through the same type of format that you've kind of cultivated and put together, whether that be podcasts, interviewing, books, etc.?
Exactly, Alex. I think it is so vital to find ways to share your story in a way that is meaningful to you. And I really believe that the one key thing is what I alluded to earlier, is to make sense of your own experience in the sense of story. Because stories, that's how we connect, right? When you look in essence at any myth, at any conversation, you look at any written work, or you look at your works of art, whether they be paintings, whether that's plays, whether that's some kind of installations, everything tells a story. And our stories are ingrained into us. They are part of our experience that is unique. And we assume that they're just there and that they're available. But I believe that we need to be able to draw them out, to be able to bring them out, to inspect them, to find little things that really stand out for you, to find out what made the difference, to tell it in a cohesive way. And to do that, the best way that I've found is to be able to speak them out loud. And what I know what's helped me tremendously to find that way of expression before I even began doing podcast episodes, before I even got into any kind of writing whatsoever, is what every day I would go out for a walk, and I would talk things out loud. I would ask questions. I'd say, why did this happen? Why do I feel this way? What do I do now? And I would answer my own questions. And I would just literally talk through things out loud. And, I'm sure it looked weird from outside looking in. I didn't care, but it really helped me to make sense of what's going on. So I strongly believe that when you can find a way, and you can do that in a way that is already aligned with what you're doing. Maybe you're in a car driving to work. Maybe it's part of what you're already doing in your life anyway, but finding a space and time where you can talk through things out loud and ask questions, get answers, share things. And then it becomes much easier to not only share your story in a way that is creative and expressive in the context of a book or a podcast, but it also is becomes a different conversation with people around you as an avenue to seek connection and support, and camaraderie. Because when all of a sudden, when you, for example, we have a conversation, Alex, and you say to me, hey, how's things going? And I say, you know what, I'm not feeling so well. You say, well, what's up? And all of a sudden, I don't have to think what happened, because I can just tell you, because I've already thought things through. I already talked it out. So I don't need to make some big speech. I can just let it happen. And that's what it's all about. When you're able to make sense of different stories that come up, how you think, what's important to you, then it becomes very easy for you to express it in a natural way.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are going to take a lot out of that. So that's awesome to hear. I appreciate that piece of advice. In the interest of time, Joe, one thing I wanted to get to, if you have a moment, is to maybe do an exercise of letting go, which is something that I know you talk about. So I'll let you take over that.
Yeah, thanks, Alice, because I think it's so vital that we go through our difficult experiences in life often, and we have things that we hold on to, and I don't believe that we can. It's maybe always easy to let go of situations that we find ourselves in, because that's life. But it's often it's vital to let go of thoughts that might be unhelpful, that might be holding you back. And I call this worry thoughts, right? These thoughts that worry you or trouble you or make you feel small. And these thoughts, these worries, they can affect us in powerful ways. So what I really want to do is a quick way to try to let go. And what I would urge you to do right now is just to try it out with me. It's not going to be something weird. It's not going to be some weird exercise. Yeah, cool. So what I want you to do is obviously to get comfortable, right? You're sitting down, get comfortable, and it's going to be a visualization thing. But first, I want you to get a steady breath, because sometimes we huff and puff, and we want to get the steady breath. So if you can take a breath that goes all the way to your tummy, breathe in, breathe out. And what I want you to do now is imagine, you can close your eyes, you can keep them open, whatever works for you. What I want you to do now is think of one unhelpful thought that you might have, a worry, something that's holding you back, something that's been upsetting you, maybe something that annoyed you today. I want you to think of it right now, something that you don't like, something that is not helping you to live your life. And when you have that thought in your life, in your head right now, I want you to think of an object, something that you could hold in your hands that comes up for you. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be some symbolic representation, but whatever is connected with this worry thought, whatever, I want you to think of an object that you could hold in your hands. The first thing that pops into your mind is fine. It could be a box, it could be a ball of fire, it could be a bird, whatever that is, it's not important. Something that represents this worry thought that pops into your mind. And I want you to imagine that you are holding this object in your hands. And what I want you to notice, that as you're holding it, that this worry exists outside of you. It's not part of who you are. It doesn't say anything about who you are. It exists. It exists outside of you. You're holding it in your hands. And I want you to look at it and see it for what it is. It's something that has essentially nothing to do with you. It just came into your mind, but you're going to let it go. And I want you to imagine that you are leaving this object out. It's going to lift up from your hands and it's going to go. And I want you to imagine that it's something that disappears off into the distance. It's floating away from you and you're watching it go. And you can have this open view now, right? Because this thing is floated away. It's no longer there. It's a part of your life. It came in but now it's off. And now you can open your eyes if you have closed your eyes before. And now you were able to let this thought go out into the world. Was it helpful, Alex?
It was. I actually legitimately did think of something today that just with work was like bearing on me. So I think it's helpful to notice that, you know, it's not something that holds you down internally. If you can actually get rid of something and visualize getting it out of your hands and visualizing it outside your body, I think that makes a big difference. So I actually really enjoyed that.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Last question before I let you go. I ask everybody this question, unrelated to everything. What are the top 3 fruits for you, Joe? What are your top 3 favorite fruits?
Well, I'm a new man, Alex, because now, since going through cancer, fruit has become a part of my life. So now I can legitimately answer this question, quite honestly. First of all, it would be the pineapple. I've learned to have a pineapple on a grill. So when I make a barbecue, I put pineapple on it. That's one. Pomegranates. I don't know how to deal with them. That's why I ask my wife to peel them open, but I put them into the salads. They work like a treat. And the third thing is, that would be kiwis, right?
Nice.
Kiwis. Well, I'm in Australia. We're close to New Zealand. That's where it's from. And it's good for you as well. So yeah.
I like it. I like it. I love it. Those are great. Pineapple are on my list. I think throwing them on the grill, I might have to give a try. I've not tried that before. So you've given me a new task to take away today. That's perfect.
Things will never be the same.
I love it. Incredible. Joe, look, I appreciate you taking the time to jump on with us. I know this is the second appearance on We Get It. You're firmly ingrained now in Yak, whether you like it or not. And I think a lot of people are going to take a lot away from this. So really appreciate you jumping on and sharing all your info. I want to share the info of the book within the show notes so everybody watching can take a look at the actual link and learn a little bit more about finding hope in times of uncertainty. And if you want to pick it up, you just follow that link there. But Joe, again, appreciate it. And thanks for jumping on.
Thank you, Alex. And I want to say a huge thank you for having me on, and a huge thank you to you, and huge thank you to what Yak is doing. I had the privilege, obviously, I've been friends with you and meeting lots of amazing people that part of Yak, which Alex, obviously you, Gabriel, Jeff, Corinne, so incredible people. You have an incredible team. I love everything that you're doing. I am a fan for life. So thank you so much for what you do out in the world. You rock.
Appreciate it. Perfect send off. I couldn't have said it better myself. So we'll just take off. I appreciate it, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, man.